I found out I was still in my pajamas. I hadn't even made coffee yet. I was standing in my kitchen in the apartment I'd saved up for 3 years to afford, and I picked up my phone just to check the time. But my banking app notification was sitting right there on the lock screen, and the number it showed me didn't make sense. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before I unlocked the phone and opened the app properly. $41.17. My business account, the one I had been building since I was 26 years old. The one I had put every extra dollar into for 4 years. The one that held $68,000 of my startup capital showed $41.17. I sat down on the kitchen floor, not on a chair, on the floor, because my legs just stopped working. The weird thing is, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there on the cold tile in my pajamas and thought, very calmly, they were at my house last weekend. Let me back up, because you need to understand what kind of family I come from before any of this makes sense. I'm 31. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My brother is 28. My sister is 28. My sister is 24. I won't use their real names here because honestly, I'm still in the middle of everything legally, but just know that the 3 of us grew up in a house where money was always tight, and I was always the one who figured it out. When I was 15, my dad lost his job at the plant, and my mom picked up double shifts at the grocery store. I started tutoring neighbor kids for $20 an hour and giving half of it to my mom for groceries. I didn't resent it then. I was proud of it. I thought that's what family did. By the time I was in college, I had a part-time bookkeeping job for a small landscaping company, and I realized I was actually good at numbers. Not just competent, genuinely good. I got my accounting degree, got my CPA license at 24, worked for a firm for 3 years, saved aggressively, and at 27, I started my own bookkeeping and tax prep business out of my apartment. It grew faster than I expected. By the time I was 30, I had 11 regular small business clients, 2 part-time contractors working for me, and I had just started the process of formalizing everything into a proper LLC with a dedicated business account. That account held my operating capital, my tax reserves, and the money I was planning to use to lease actual office space, $68,000. 4 years of careful, boring, unglamorous work. My family was proud of me in the way families are proud when they don't entirely understand what you do. My mom told people I worked with numbers. My dad told people I had my own business. They came to my apartment sometimes for dinners, and they always made comments about how nice everything was, and I always noticed those comments, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I should have listened to myself. My cousin's graduation party was the weekend before everything fell apart. My aunt, my mom's sister, lives about 40 minutes from me, and she threw a big backyard party for her youngest finishing community college. The whole family came. I went. Because I always go. Because I have never in my adult life successfully said no to my family without it becoming a 3-day ordeal. I drove separately because I had a client call at 2 in the afternoon that I needed to take from my car. I showed up around noon, helped set up tables, chatted with relatives I see maybe twice a year. It was fine. It was a normal family party. At some point in the early afternoon, my brother asked if he could use my laptop. He said his phone was almost dead, and he wanted to show our cousin something on YouTube as a graduation gift kind of thing. A video channel he thought she'd like. My laptop was in my bag in my aunt's spare bedroom. I said sure. That's the part I have replayed approximately 4,000 times since then. I said sure, in the voice of someone who has absolutely no suspicion whatsoever, handing my bag to my brother and going back out to the backyard to eat potato salad. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to know, was that my laptop was still logged into my business banking portal from the night before, when I'd been reconciling accounts. I have 2-factor authentication on everything, but I had checked the Trust This Device box on my personal laptop months ago because I log in every single day and the extra step was annoying me. I trusted the device? The device was currently in my brother's hands. He was in that room for about 25 minutes. I didn't think anything of it. He came back out with my bag and said his cousin loved the video and could he have more potato salad? And I said yes and scooted the bowl toward him, and that was that. 2 days later, $41.17. I want to describe what it felt like to sit on that kitchen floor because I think people imagine it's like a movie, dramatic, loud, tears streaming down your face. It wasn't like that. It felt like the moment after a car accident, right before the pain hits. Everything was very quiet and very clear. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could see a scuff on the baseboard across the kitchen that I'd been meaning to clean for weeks. I thought very specifically, I need to call the bank. I need to do that before I do anything else. I called the bank. I was on hold for 11 minutes. When someone picked up, I explained that my business account had been drained and I needed to know when the transfers had gone out and where they had gone. 4 transfers, 2 days ago, all to external accounts, all authorized from a device the bank recognized as trusted. I wrote down everything the representative told me. I thanked her and I hung up. Then I sat back down on the floor and I let myself think the thing I'd been not thinking for the last 20 minutes. My brother had been alone with my laptop for 25 minutes. My laptop had been logged into my banking portal. 4 transfers had gone out 2 days ago, the same evening he'd been at that party, from a trusted device. I didn't call him right away. That instinct, to immediately pick up the phone and demand an explanation, I pushed it down, because something else was already surfacing underneath the shock. Something colder and more focused. I had been doing other people's finances for 4 years. I knew how money moved. I knew what a paper trail looked like. If I called him now, angry and panicking, I would get lies. Maybe tears, maybe a counteraccusation. The money would be gone and I would have nothing. I needed to think before I acted, so I made coffee. I got up off the floor, I made coffee, and I sat at my kitchen table and I thought for a very long time. The first thing I did was call my attorney. I have a business attorney. I've had one since I formalized my LLC, and her name is not important. But she picked up on the second ring and she listened to everything I said without interrupting once. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Don't contact him yet. Don't contact anyone in your family yet. I need you to come into the office this afternoon and bring every piece of documentation you have." I brought everything. Bank statements, transfer records, the screenshot the bank representative had helped me pull up showing the device session, the timestamp of when my brother had asked to borrow my laptop versus when the transfers had initiated. It was all there. Clean, clear, documented. My attorney looked at everything and said, "This is wire fraud. This is not a family dispute. This is a federal crime." I had known that intellectually from the moment I saw the bank statement, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a different way. She told me we needed to file a police report. She told me we needed to contact the bank's fraud department with the evidence package we were assembling. She told me, and this is the part that surprised me, that I needed to act fast, because if the money had been moved into accounts that were then used to make purchases or transfer out again, recovery became significantly more complicated. I asked her what my chances were of getting the money back. She said, "Better than most people in your situation because you have documentation and you moved quickly. But I want you to be prepared that this may not be fast and it may not be complete." I said, "Okay." I said, "Let's do what we need to do." I did not call my brother for 5 days. During those 5 days, I filed a police report. I worked with my attorney and the bank's fraud investigation team. I quietly pulled my contractors to reduced hours using a cover story about a slow quarter. I didn't want anyone to know what was happening until I had a clearer picture. I did not post anything on social media. I did not tell my mom. I did not tell my sister. I spoke to no one in my family. What I did do, very quietly, was ask my mom a single question over text. I told her I was updating some beneficiary information and just double-checking. Had anyone in the family come into any money recently? A windfall? An inheritance from somewhere? Anything like that? She texted back immediately. "No. Why?" Then, about 3 minutes later, another text. "Actually, your brother mentioned something about paying off a credit card. I didn't ask too much about it." There it was. I screenshotted that. I sent it to my attorney. On day 5, my attorney had enough. She told me it was time to contact my brother, and that when I did, she wanted to be on the call. I called him on a Tuesday evening. He picked up on the third ring with the exact casual tone of someone who has no idea anything is wrong, and the sound of his voice made my stomach clench in a way I hadn't expected. Because this was my brother. This was the person I used to share a bedroom wall with. The person I'd covered for when he came home past curfew in high school. The person I'd lent money to, legitimately, in cash, as a gift, at least 4 times in the last 3 years. I said his name. I said, "I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to listen before you say anything." I told him what I knew, not everything. I didn't tell him about the attorney on the line, or the police report, or the bank fraud case. I just told him that I had seen the transfer records, and I knew what had happened. and I was giving him a chance to tell me his side before this went further. There was a silence that lasted about 7 seconds. I counted. Then he said, I was going to pay it back. I just needed it for a minute. Things have been really hard. You have no idea. I said, how much of it is left? Another silence. I don't know. Maybe half? Maybe half. Maybe $34,000 of my $68,000 was already spent. On what? I still don't entirely know. I've heard things since then. Debts, someone he owed money to. I don't know the full picture, and at this point, I've stopped trying to find out because it doesn't change anything. I said, I want you to know that this is already being handled by my attorney and the bank's fraud team. You're going to be contacted. What happens next depends on a lot of things, but I wanted to call you myself first. He started to say something. I think it was going to be an apology, or maybe a justification, I'll never know. And I hung up. I sat in my car in the parking lot outside my apartment building for about 10 minutes. Then I went inside and I made dinner and I watched something completely mindless on TV because I had learned in those 5 days that the only way I was going to get through this was to stop letting it swallow every hour of every day. What happened next was slow and bureaucratic and unglamorous, which is how real consequences usually work, not like the movies. The bank was able to freeze 2 of the 4 receiving accounts quickly enough to hold some of the money. One account had already been emptied. The 4th, the largest transfer, was partially recovered when the fraud investigation flagged it. In total, I got back a little over $41,000. Not everything, not even 2/3, but more than I'd let myself hope for in those first dark days on the kitchen floor. My brother was charged. I won't describe the legal proceedings in detail because it's still ongoing in some respects, but he was charged. It did not result in prison time. He has no prior record. He cooperated once the evidence was laid out, and the plea agreement involved restitution payments and probation. A lot of people in my life think that's not enough. Some days I think that too, but I made the decision early on that I was going to let the legal process do what it was designed to do and not spend my energy trying to control outcomes I couldn't control. My mom found out. That conversation was the hardest thing I've done in my entire life. Harder than the police report, harder than the call with my brother. Because she kept asking me why I hadn't come to her first, why I had involved lawyers and police before talking to the family. And I kept trying to explain that if I had, the money would be completely gone and nothing would be recoverable. And she kept not hearing me. She was so focused on what it looked like, family going to the authorities over family, that she couldn't absorb the reality that her son had taken $68,000 from her daughter. We didn't speak for about 2 months after that. We speak now. It's different than it was. I don't know if it will ever be what it was, and I've had to make a kind of peace with not knowing. My sister was the only one who called me in those first few days and just said, I believe you. What do you need? She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to mediate. She didn't play both sides. She just said what I needed to hear. We've gotten closer since then. My brother and I have not spoken since that Tuesday evening phone call. His restitution payments come through the court system. I don't have to interact with him to receive them. I want to talk for a minute about the parts that don't make a satisfying story, because I think when people hear something like this, they expect it to end cleanly. They want the villain to be punished, the victim to be whole, the lesson to be clear. I got $41,000 back out of $68,000. That means $27,000 is gone. I had to restructure my business plan significantly. The office space I was going to lease, I pulled back on that for now. I am still operating out of my apartment, but my client base has grown, and I have a real shot at that office space by next year if things keep going the way they're going. The business survived because I moved fast, and because I had built it carefully enough that my clients didn't have to know what was happening. None of my clients left. 2 of them actually sent referrals in the months after, completely unaware of what I was dealing with. I was grateful for that in a way I couldn't fully explain at the time. The thing I didn't expect was how the experience changed the way I work. I rebuilt my entire security setup after this. Separate devices for business and personal, 2-factor authentication with no trust this device exceptions ever again, a protocol for who can and cannot touch anything work-related. I also set up a separate emergency fund that I've never mentioned to anyone in my family and never will. Not because I assume something like this will happen again, but because I now understand viscerally that trust and access are not the same thing. I loved my brother. I trusted my brother. I had also, without realizing it, given him access he should never have had. That's not a comfortable lesson. It doesn't feel good to apply it to the people you love. But it's the lesson, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Here is the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I still turn over when I can't sleep. I was raised to believe that family is unconditional, that you help your people, you show up for your people, you forgive your people, and you don't air your grievances publicly because that's disloyal. I believed that for most of my life. I was still halfway believing it the morning I sat on my kitchen floor staring at $41 in an account that used to hold $68,000. But here's what I figured out in the time since. Unconditional love and unconditional trust are not the same thing. And I had spent my entire life treating them as if they were. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. You can grieve what a relationship was and still protect yourself from what it has become. You can be the person in your family who built something and still refuse to let that thing be used against you. I didn't press the hardest possible charges. I didn't cut off my mother permanently. I didn't do any of the things that people in the comments of a story like this might expect or want me to do. What I did was try to make the most reasonable decisions I could under circumstances that were never going to have a clean answer. My business is still here. My name is on the door. Metaphorically, because it's still my apartment. But you understand, I have clients who rely on me. I have a sister who texts me every week. I have an attorney who I will probably be sending a fruit basket every December for the rest of my life. And I have a security setup that would give a professional hacker pause. You don't get to take something from me and just walk away. Not because I'm cold, not because I'm vindictive, but because I worked too hard for too long to let someone else's sense of entitlement decide what my life looks like. I want to protect your peace. I also want to protect your savings account. Both of those things matter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I've thought a lot about what actually caused all of this, not just what my brother did, but the whole chain of it. Because nothing happens in isolation. Every outcome has a root, and if you're honest enough to trace it back, you'll usually find something that makes you uncomfortable about your own choices too. For most of my adult life, I operated on the assumption that love and trust were the same currency. If I loved someone, I trusted them. If I trusted them, I gave them access to my time, my resources, my home, eventually my laptop sitting open in a room I wasn't in. I never questioned that equation because it felt like the generous thing to do. The loyal thing. The thing a good family member does. But generosity without discernment isn't a virtue. It's a vulnerability. And I had been making myself vulnerable for years in ways I dressed up as love. My brother didn't become someone who could take $68,000 from me overnight. Looking back, there were smaller moments. Borrowed cash that never came back, excuses that didn't quite add up. A pattern I recognized in other people's finances, but somehow never applied to my own family. I saw it and I looked away. Not because I was stupid, but because looking directly at it would have required me to do something uncomfortable, and it was easier to keep showing up to the party and passing the potato salad. That's the part I had to sit with. The part that isn't satisfying to say out loud. What changed everything wasn't anger. Anger would have made me call him that first morning and yell and cry and give him time to move what was left. What changed everything was the decision, made very quietly on a cold kitchen floor, to be smarter than my grief. To think before I reacted. To use what I knew instead of what I felt. That's what got $41,000 back. Not luck, not the system working perfectly, not some dramatic confrontation. Just 5 days of discipline, documentation, and not giving anyone in my family the chance to get ahead of the evidence. I'm not telling you this to sound impressive. I'm telling you because I think a lot of people, when they're betrayed by someone they love, believe that the only two options are to blow everything up or to let it go. To go scorched earth or to swallow it and move on. But there's a third option that nobody talks about as much. You can be measured. You can be deliberate. You can grieve and strategize at the same time. Those things are not mutually exclusive. My sister figured that out faster than I did. She called me without knowing anything, just on instinct, and said, "The only thing that actually helped, I believe you. What do you need?" She didn't need the full story to choose a side. She led with her character and let the facts catch up. That's a kind of intelligence I want more of in my own life. The business is still here. I'm still here. And I have a security setup now that I genuinely should have had years ago. Not because I expect the worst from everyone, but because protecting what you've built isn't paranoia. It's respect. Respect for your own work. Respect for the people who depend on you. Respect for the version of yourself who spent 4 years building something from nothing. You don't have to choose between loving your family and protecting yourself, but you do have to stop pretending those two things never come into conflict. They do. And when they do, you're allowed to choose yourself.